Jack was a decorated space soldier stuck at the boring end of the galaxy. His post? Outpost Theta 9, a forgotten refueling station orbiting a moon nobody cared about. His days were a thrilling cycle of arguing with the coffee machine, filing reports about meteor dust, and trying very, very hard not to scream into the endless void. "This is how legends die," he'd mutter to himself, staring out at the same old patch of stars. He was a hero rusting away in a tin can, his greatest battles now fought against existential dread and bad plumbing. One night, the monotony shattered. Alarms blared through the station, echoing the long-forgotten thrill of action. Jack grabbed his rifle, mind racing with smugglers or pirates. He rounded a corner, ready for a firefight, and found a woman. She was stuck upside down in a ventilation shaft, her boots kicking uselessly at the ceiling. She was cursing, impressively, in at least 3 different alien dialects. She paused, noticing him. "Hi," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "Before you shoot me, can you help?" That was how Jack met Mira. The most exciting thing to happen on Theta 9 wasn't an invasion. It was an accidental intruder with a talent for getting stuck. Jack had so many questions. Was she a spy? A saboteur? An assassin sent by a rival faction? He was almost disappointed when he learned the truth. Mira was just a civilian engineer who had been illegally stowing away on a cargo ship. Her transport got rerouted. She panicked and ended up hiding on his station for weeks. She was wanted by 3 different bureaucracies for paperwork violations, not for galactic espionage. According to every rule in his book, Jack should have reported her immediately. He was a soldier, and she was an unauthorized presence. But as she explained her predicament, looking less like a threat and more like someone who just needed a break, he did the one thing the regulations didn't account for. He brought her soup. It turned out, letting a fugitive engineer hang around had its perks. Mira took one look at Jack's nemesis, the broken coffee machine, and had it purring like new in under 10 minutes. In that moment, Jack decided he trusted her with his life. That simple act of kindness, of fixing something broken, opened a door between them. They started talking, late into the station's artificial nights. They talked about broken systems, both mechanical and bureaucratic. They shared stories of bad assignments and dreams they had long since buried. For the first time in years, Jack wasn't just surviving his post, he was living. He found himself laughing, a sound he barely recognized, more in 1 week with Mira than he had in the last decade. He was a decorated soldier, but she was the one who finally disarmed him. Their fragile peace was destined to break. An alert flashed on Jack's console. Command was sending a team for a surprise station inspection. Myra's face went pale. She wasn't a spy, but to the rigid military bureaucracy, she was something just as bad, an anomaly, an illegal civilian who would be detained, interrogated, and probably disappeared into some forgotten detention facility. "If they find me, I'm gone," she whispered, the fear in her voice chillingly real. Jack looked at her, then at the console displaying the inbound ship. The soldier in him knew his duty. But the man who had rediscovered laughter knew his choice. Without a second of hesitation, he said, "Then we make sure they don't." In that instant, Jack's mission changed. It was no longer about defending an outpost. It was about defending her. And for the first time in a long, long time, he wasn't alone. The inspection went, to put it mildly, very badly. Their plan to hide Myra fell apart spectacularly. and soon they weren't just hiding, they were running. They scrambled into a barely functional maintenance shuttle just as station security stormed the hangar bay. As they blasted off, alarms screaming behind them and warning lights flashing on their dashboard, they both started laughing. It was a hysterical, breathless laugh, the kind you only have when you've just escaped certain doom by the skin of your teeth. And as he looked at Mira, her face lit by the chaos, Jack had a startling realization. Running for your life was significantly more romantic than he'd ever been led to believe. Adrift in the black, they became a two-person crew against the universe. Their days fell into a rhythm. Mira, the brilliant engineer, coaxed the shuttle's failing systems back to life with little more than spare parts and sheer stubbornness. Jack, the soldier, stood guard, scanning the void for threats and plotting their next move. They drifted for weeks, living on ration packs and borrowed time. They argued about who got the last protein bar and then laughed about how absurd their lives had become. One quiet night, floating between star fields, Mira admitted something softly. "I didn't think I'd survive this long." Jack looked over at her, the only other person in his tiny, broken world. "Same," he replied. "Guess we're both just bad at dying." Their luck nearly ran out in an asteroid field. A pirate ambush came out of nowhere, their ship appearing from the shadow of a massive rock. The fight was brutal and short. Jack threw himself in front of Mira, taking a plasma burn to his shoulder that would have ended her. The pain was searing, but a new, sharper feeling cut through it: fear. It wasn't the abstract fear of battle he'd known his whole life. This fear had a name, and it was Mira. The thought of losing her was more terrifying than any enemy he'd ever faced. Later, while she was patching him up, her hands gentle but trembling, the silence in the tiny medbay was thick with unspoken words. With her head bowed over his wound, she whispered, so quietly he almost missed it, "Don't you dare die on me." "I just got used to you." A weak smile touched Jack's lips. The pain meds were kicking in, or maybe it was just the truth finally bubbling to the surface. "Good," he managed to say. "Because I think I'm in love with you." She stopped, looked up at him, and her eyes said everything. Then she leaned down and kissed him. It wasn't a dramatic movie-style kiss. It was quiet and messy and perfect. Once they reached a neutral trade hub, they were finally safe. This was the logical place to part ways. Jack could disappear and find a new life. Mira could use her skills to get a legitimate job. They could both go back to being alone. But as they stood in the crowded spaceport, the thought of saying goodbye felt wrong. It felt like a surrender. So they didn't. Jack sent a one-line message back to his old command, his resignation. He was done being a soldier. He turned to Mira, his future uncertain but his heart sure. She simply took his hand, her grip firm and steady. "All right," she said with a small smile. "Let's see where this goes, together." Jack's proposal was objectively the worst in galactic history. It happened during a critical engine failure on their new, slightly used freighter. The gravity plating had shorted out, so they were both floating. Alarms were blaring, and Jack, in the middle of the chaos, decided this was the moment. He presented a ring fashioned from a spare coupling, which promptly floated away from his fingers. Mira just stared at him for a second, then burst out laughing. It was a deep, joyous laugh that filled the noisy cabin. She laughed so hard she started crying, tears floating in little spheres around her face. "Yes," she finally gasped, wiping them away. But you absolutely owe me a better story to tell our kids. Their wedding was just as chaotic and unplanned. They found a 24-hour chapel on a neutral station, run by a very confused priest who seemed more accustomed to blessing cargo than uniting couples. Their witnesses were a maintenance drone that kept beeping approvingly, and two smugglers from the cantina next door who wandered in and decided to clap anyway. There was no family, no fancy dinner, no music. It was just them, two strangers who became a team, promising to stick together. It was perfect. They decided to try settling down. They bought a small plot of land on a quiet colony world, a place with real dirt and a blue sky. Jack, the former soldier, tried his hand at farming. He was terrible at it. His crops were pathetic, and he once got into a losing battle with a flock of stubborn, bird-like creatures. Myra found his complete incompetence at agriculture endlessly attractive. She was the one who could fix a hyperdrive, but he was the one trying to grow space potatoes for their dinner. It was a new kind of life, quieter, but no less of an adventure. The next surprise came when Myra handed Jack a medical scanner without a word. He stared at the flickering screen, utterly confused by the strange rhythmic pulse it displayed. He looked at her, then back at the scanner. It took a full minute for his brain to connect the dots. We made a person? He asked, his voice full of disbelief and awe. Myra's smile was radiant. Yes, she confirmed. Try not to panic. He immediately panicked. The man who faced down pirates without flinching was terrified by the idea of becoming a father. Their first child arrived screaming, red-faced, and absolutely perfect. The moment Jack held the tiny, wiggling baby, something inside him shifted forever. He cried. Not silent, stoic tears, but real, messy, happy ones. Myra just watched him, her tired face breaking into a soft laugh. Their little ship, their little farm, their little life for two suddenly became a life for three. The house got louder, the nights got shorter, and their world became infinitely better. And then the family just kept growing. After the first child, others followed, seemingly in quick succession. 2, then 3, then 4. Their little homestead started to feel a lot more crowded. Jack, the decorated soldier, had to learn a whole new set of skills. He mastered the art of changing diapers in zero gravity during emergency ship repairs. He became an expert storyteller, weaving tales of heroic engine failures and brave coffee machines. And he learned to function, even thrive, on a diet of caffeine and almost no sleep. Those were the chaos years. The house was a constant symphony of noise, shouting, laughing, crying, and the occasional mysterious explosion from the kids' room. Food vanished from the pantry at an alarming rate. Someone always needed a hug, a bandage, or help finding a lost toy. It was messy and exhausting and relentless. And looking around at his loud, chaotic, beautiful family, Jack had never felt richer in his entire life. He had fought for systems and governments, but this was what was truly worth defending. It wasn't always easy. Love, he learned, wasn't just grand gestures and dramatic escapes. Sometimes it was just daily. It was arguing over finances when money was tight. It was being stressed and tired and snapping at each other, only to apologize minutes later. It was the quiet, unspoken support after a long day. The drama of running for their lives was replaced by the steady pressure of raising a family. But through all of it, they never stopped choosing each other. Every single day, they woke up and made the choice to be a team. When their sixth and final child was born, Jack watched Mira holding the newborn, her face tired but serene. He looked at her, then at the 5 other children peeking into the room, and he was just filled with this overwhelming sense of awe. "You're incredible," he said, his voice thick with emotion. She looked up from the baby and gave him a familiar, teasing smirk. "You helped," she reminded him. Years later, they would stand on their porch, watching their noisy, wonderful children play under the twin suns of their colony world. Jack would think back to the man he used to be, the lonely soldier, resting away at the edge of the galaxy, waiting for a glorious end. He had been so sure that was his story. He smiled, feeling Myra's hand slip into his. He had been so wrong. The years passed gently. Jack's hair turned gray at the temples, and Myra earned beautiful laugh lines around her eyes. Their home was never quiet, always filled with the comings and goings of their children and eventually their grandchildren. They had built not just a family, but a legacy. Jack taught the kids courage, how to face down their fears, whether it was a school bully or a faulty circuit. Myra taught them kindness, how to fix what was broken, whether it was a toy or a friend's heart. Their children grew up with a unique blend of strength and compassion. Even after all that time, the spark was still there. They still flirted over the dinner table. They still held hands while watching the stars. They still laughed at inside jokes no one else understood. They still chose each other every morning, every night. It wasn't a choice anymore. It was as natural as breathing. One evening, looking back on their impossible journey, Jack turned to Mira and said, "Best assignment I ever had." She just smiled and kissed him, a quiet thank you for the life they had built from nothing. Under a canopy of unfamiliar stars, surrounded by the laughter of the family they made, Jack finally understood. He hadn't found love in the heat of battle or in a blaze of glory. He found it in a ventilation shaft, in a broken-down shuttle, in a messy house filled with chaos and joy. He found it in the most unexpected place in the universe, and it was a love that was real and strong, and it lasted forever. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more stories.